At last, 1933. Hollywood was in the middle of the Great Depression, but you wouldn't know it from the silver screen. The studio system was king, and audiences were escaping their troubles for just a few cents. Warner Brothers had their tough talking gangsters, with James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson running the show. MGM, they were all about spectacle, with Clark Gable rising to stardom. And then there was Katharine Hepburn, bursting onto the scene with Morning Glory, already proving she was something special. Meanwhile, Busby Berkeley was reinventing musicals with kaleidoscopic dance numbers in 42nd Street and Gold Diggers of 1933. And of course, the Big Ape himself. King Kong climbed the Empire State Building and cemented his place in cinematic history. It was the year of escapism, of glitz and grit, and Hollywood proving that no matter how tough times got, the movies would always be there to take you somewhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinema 100, and this is the year 1933. Will and I closed the chapter on yet another year. 1932 was the year, and what a year it was, as we sat down and we watched 7 different films. We only had one double feature this time, but 7 different films. A lot of first-time directors in this year. I think it was kind of a year for us where we really didn't know a lot about the films going into it. And now we know 7 more. So I don't know if that means we're an expert in that year or not, but for us here at Cinema 100, we're trying our best. Will, welcome to Cinema 100, buddy. How was 1932 to you?
I feel like it started off okay and then kind of slowly ticked up. I thought we ended pretty strong. Trouble in Paradise was kind of that 5th movie we watched, and then from there, for me, I really enjoyed the last 3 movies we watched. So, is it the strongest year we've had? Definitely not the strongest year we've had, but definitely not the weakest either. So, kind of that mid tier.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would put it, except I personalized it with bookends. So for me personally, I know we were a little opposite on this. I thought we started weak and ended weak, but everything in the middle, it kind of like plateaued and like or peaked and then kind of worked its way back down. I it's funny because there's a couple movies this year that kind of caught me off guard, and I find myself in hindsight liking them maybe more than I did when I first watched them. And I don't know if that's just I've forgotten the things that I disliked about it, and only the things that I liked about it stay with me. And sometimes that happens with these movies, especially I think we got busier during this year with our real lives. So
Right.
this was probably stretched out over 2 months where normally we don't do that. I want to kind of note these movies real quick because we had 7 of them. We started off with Shanghai Express, went from there to Freaks, and Freaks feels like just years ago.
It does.
After that, we watched Scarface, The Grand Hotel, Trouble in Paradise, I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, and A Farewell to Arms. When I was looking at, the breakdown of the directors here. So Joseph von Sternberg, we've had him before. We did Morocco. Todd Browning, we did Dracula. We had him before. So we kind of wanted to see how they evolve in their catalog of films and their storytelling. But we haven't had Edmund Goulding. We haven't had Ernst Lubitsch. We haven't had Frank Borsage or Mervyn LeRoy. So I think we've got some new players to bring to the table. What I'm going to be interested in 1933, 34, 35 is do these guys have staying power? You know what I mean? Do they make a good film and they're kind of on the mark for that calendar year and then we forget about them? Or are they here to stay? And that's what I'm going to be interested in this year. So, Will, when we compare 32 to 31, I thought 31 was one of our stronger years. That's City Lights, that's M, that's The Front Page. When we compare it to that year, it looks a little weaker.
Yeah.
When we first started drafting, didn't you get a sense that it felt like, since we haven't heard a lot of these films, we might be kind of in a little bit of a lull year as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had so many movies that had big names in 1931. So, I mean, we had Charlie Chaplin, we had the big names of Dracula and Frankenstein to kind of fall back on. And then you hear Fritz Lang, and you kind of, if you have studied any sort of film history, even, a novice like me has heard that name. So 31 was definitely a year that had a lot more names that were familiar, and it helped too that we were running into even the movies that we hadn't really heard much about had actresses that we had already run into. So we saw Norma Shear and Joan Crawford. So it is kind of fun here as I was prepping for the 1933 draft, seeing some of the names at play and starting to become a little bit more familiar with the landscape, and it's been refreshing. But as far as that 31 to 32, it definitely felt like we might be getting into a dip, and that's kind of what it felt like after as well.
Yeah, and it's so funny, Will, because I thought the same thing. I'm looking at 1933, and I'm like, hey, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that that's a director in the year 1930. Like, I love that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, we're kind of achieving some of the goals in which we set out to achieve. I would love to do, when we come up on our 1 year anniversary show, I would love to do maybe one in person, because
Mhm.
one of the fun things that we could do with it is, hey, here's a picture of an actress. Can you identify her? I'm still not quite sure that I can separate, Greta Garbo, Jean Harlow, Joan Crawford, maybe Joan
Yeah.
Crawford a little more, but like some of these names, I'm not sure I can separate them yet and identify them on screen. But
Yeah.
with that being said, I think I could identify a Norma Shear because she's kind of stood out to me a little bit. I could identify
Mhm.
a Paul Mooney because he stood out a little bit to me, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm with you, man. It's exciting that we're in year what? 6 of this journey so far, and
Yeah.
we are starting to kind of recite these names a little bit more. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
With that being said, when you're looking at today's movies, I wanted to jump on this because I was just talking to you off screen, Will, about the idea of I went and saw a movie called Anora, and that's a 2024 film that we'll get to in year 2024. But it's being touted as being one of the best. And I personally think the year 2024 has been a down year for movies compared to what I thought was more of a resurgence in the year 2023. I thought we had a lot of great films last year.
Yeah.
A lot of, it felt like cinema and theater experience was kind of working its way back from kind of shedding its, superhero and the comic book and coming post COVID. We survived it. It felt like we were kind of getting back to normal. And then this year, I don't know that there's been a lot of great films, but let me get to my question. I was watching the performances in Anora, and I thought they were really good. I thought they were really well done and convincing and the whole nine. That being said, I I wonder if you judge a movie more on an actor's performance,
Mhm.
even though the plot might not be where you want it to be. Like we were talking about, I'm a fugitive from a chain gang. That could be hit or miss with some people, but Paul
Yeah.
Mooney does a great job. Does that elevate the movie for you? Um, do you put more on if a director is telling a first time story or something that you maybe a new take on something, but the performances don't quite live up? Do you give it a pass because they tried something new, or does everything need to mesh? Like, where are you at? What elevates a movie to you, even in the year 1932 as we get into 1933?
Oh man, loaded question, right? Because like when you think of the great films, they everything adds up to it being great, right? Um, and it's really hard to kind of parse out like if you have a great performance, can it be a great movie? I do think there's instances of that. I'd have to think really hard. Like, how about Donnie Darko, right? Jake
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal is like just so like such a teenage like he just has such a good performance in that film, and it really kind of draws a good movie out of it because really the plot's fucking nonsense, right? I
Yeah.
but that's an example of a good actor. I'm trying to like to kind of answer all the questions at once. I think a really good example of this is to talk about Mad Max, because Mad Max has got the three films originally with Mel Gibson, and those are all pretty good films. The first two are better than the third one, and then we get
Agreed.
to what?
I said agreed.
Agreed?
Yep.
Okay.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we get to Fury Road in 2015, or was it 16, somewhere in there, where Fury Road came out, and that movie has like doesn't really have performances to write home about, right? Like Charlize Theron's good, and yeah, Tom Hardy's
Tom Hart.
good, and everyone's good, but that's not the point of that movie, right? The
Right.
point of that movie is He's telling an ecological story about the death of Earth and the downfall of humanity, right? And like, we don't need those performances to be great because everything else around it is just perfect. Fast forward to the one that just came out with Furiosa, and I like that film, but it fell back because the performances were made more front and center, with Chris Hemsworth kind of becoming the lead villain, and Anya Taylor-Joy just kind of having a lot to do in that film. So you just get this, like, you get the performances not quite being there enough. So I guess the question really is the film about the performances? How much do the performances matter to the overall story? And if it's a lot and the performances aren't up to par, it's not as good a movie.
No, and that's fair. And sometimes you're almost handcuffed by the success of your predecessor too, right? So, like in the case of Fury Road, because it was so, you know, uh, exceptional,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to make a second movie that's going to live up to that standard, right? So, I
Right.
think it was a good thing that we loved Batman, the origin story, right?
Mm-hmm.
We loved it, but I don't think anybody thought it was groundbreaking, right? Like, it was really good storytelling. We loved the origin story. We love how it was rooted in reality. But then when we got to the Dark Knight, it was elevated. If we would have got like something like the Dark Knight first and then kind of went back down to the Batman, I think we would have seen that franchise in a completely different light. So
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I guess I think to get the main crux of your question is, what's the most important part to a movie? For me, it's not the performances, though it matters a lot. It's a big piece of the pie. The biggest piece of the pie is a story that unfolds and feels from the world, and it doesn't feel forced and doesn't feel too written.
and that's interesting because that's where I think you and I differ a little bit. Is that
Yeah.
if a story doesn't have the vehicle which I'm experiencing your world in, which is the performances, like I can watch a bad movie and see exceptional performances. I wish I had something off the top of my head. Like, I guess you said Donnie Darko, right? Like, I can stick through that 90 minutes, that hour and a half, that 2 hours, whatever, just to kind of continue to watch a performance. Um, but if the performances are off key, even though I might be getting this like great story, that I'm just missing all of it because I'm watching it being performed poorly. So that
Yeah.
that might be a little bit different, but yeah, it's just particular taste. That's all it is.
Right.
Let's talk Oscars 1932. We had 7 different films, like I said. I want to go ahead and list the directors with those. Shanghai Express was directed by Joseph von Sternberg. Freaks was directed by Todd Browning, same guy who did Dracula. Then we got Howard Hawks and Richard Rawson did Scarface. Edmund Goulding did Grand Hotel. Ernst Lubitsch did Trouble in Paradise. Mervyn LeRoy did I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. And then Frank Borsage did A Farewell to Arms. Now, normally we work our way backwards. We start with the supporting cast and work our way to the best picture. I thought we'd have a little fun. Let's talk best picture right away. What stood out to you? What was your favorite film experience? Oh, and maybe let me ask this question. Does your favorite viewing experience always match up with your best movie of the year?
Hmm. No, that's a good question, because I think my favorite viewing of the year was probably Trouble in Paradise. I thought that was the most fun hang. Right, I thought that everything was kind of working in unison towards something. I didn't necessarily love the payoff at the very end of the day. I thought it worked well enough, but it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But along the way, you've got good performances, you got a lot of fun, some funny moments, and it all worked pretty well. So I think that was my favorite watch, but I don't think it was the best movie of the year. So, I mean,
I'm with
my
you.
best. Okay.
No, just real quick before you deliver, I just want to say my favorite was Freaks because I had absolutely no expectations of the movie. And I was so pleasantly surprised that how much I enjoyed the film from beginning to the end. So much so that like I enjoyed the ending so much that it sticks with me. Like, I'm never going to forget the decision that was made with the Layla Himes character
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it so much that I wanted to give it that honorary mention and just make sure that I mentioned it here. So I'm glad I
Yeah.
did that. But with that being said, Will, give me your best movie of the year 1932.
Yeah. So I think for me, at the end of the day, it really is pretty easy, because it's I am a fugitive from a chain gang. I think this is an instance where the weaknesses of the movie are so small, but there because there's the minor weaknesses there. When we were talking about it last week, I kind of had like overemphasized on them, but the more and more I thought about it, the more I thought that Paul Mooney's performance for one just kind of carried this movie and made it something that I feel like could be watched today, uh, and rewatchable, because I think there's a lot of things going on there, but also the way that uh, some of the shots in the movie, some of the parallels that are kind of we're working through right now as a society about, how much we owe society, and how much we are all part of a chain gang. So it all kind of added up for me to be the best movie of the year.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of a different take from a week ago when we talked about our double feature, just where you ended on the one versus the other. Um, I'm right there with you. I chose I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. I think we, after a week after seeing those two movies and just looking at it the whole year in totality, I'm with you. I felt like this is the movie that had a clear, distinct message too, and
Yeah.
kept to that narrative the entire time. It wasn't boggled down through a love story, whatever it might be, which isn't necessarily wrong because we might, you know, we might need to experience a love story to get to whatever message is being delivered. So I didn't want to come off negative on that, but in this
Sure.
case, it's right to the point. It sticks to it, and it feels like we're off to the races right from the get go. Uh,
Yeah.
just for the crowd, it's I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang was the movie about a wrongfully imprisoned man who endures the beating and brutality of a chain gang and attempts a daring escape. And this film exposes the harsh realities of the American penal system in 1930s. And you already kind of mentioned it a little bit about how we're still kind of facing those things today.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? There was a guy that was on CNN News talking about um, I forget all of them. There's like a list of 20 of these things. Things like NyQuil, Benadryl, things
Mm.
that they believed had helped us in the past. They're finding out that they are learning so many new things about these medicines that they actually did nothing to us. So
Mm.
now, not all of them. Like there's Benadryl, like there's very specific Benadryl this, Benadryl that. There are some Benadryls that work.
Okay.
But like they were talking about like NyQuil, like PM, right? This thing you take to help you feel better was never actually making you feel better. Now, the reason I bring this up because I thought it was interesting is it goes to this idea of we package something, we sell it to a society that we know what we're talking about, and
Mm.
then a new society comes around and says, "No, you were wrong the entire time." And that happens in generations. When you look at "I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang,"
Mhm.
what is good in 1930, being on a literal chain gang, looks like in 2024 as being immoral and dehumane and all these things that come from it. So,
Yeah.
um, what's scary is, if I can go there just a little bit, we did just have an election here recently, and it might be a stretch of the imagination to say we're going to go back to a chain gang, but these are kind of how these things start, right? Is that
Mm.
there's a constant swinging of the pendulum, right? And when you think you're on this track of momentum and inevitable progress, and something kind of halts that and says, "No, no, no, this is what our version of progress looks like," but to a whole half of community or a population, they believe we're going backwards, where half population believes they're going forward. So it's like this swinging. Where does it stop? I just feel like for our side of things, it just feels like these things could come back if you kept taking another notch. You know what I mean? It wouldn't
Yeah.
come back in 4 years, no, but in 40 years it could.
Right. Yeah. And sorry, I was kind of doing a quick Google search here because I quoted Killer Mike last week. So I just wanted to quote him again real quick. Funny fact about a cage: they're never built just for just one group. So when that cage is done with them and you still pour it, come for you. And that's the mentality here that I've kind of been living off of as like how I make a lot of my political decisions. The thing that's changed most about me is that I try to not just think about myself. I try to think of myself in context of a whole. And what's good for me is often what's good for the group. But sometimes what's best for me is taking a step back and allowing others to kind of come up as well. And that's the biggest thing that's changed about me. Anybody who has known me my whole life, I grew up very conservative. I was very conservative until the first time I saw Donald Trump on top of the primaries in 2015, and I started going something's not right here for me. And yeah, I mean, it really is that simple. And this movie kind of drives that home. Like the things that we do right now may, be law, but that doesn't mean they're moral. So we need to think about things a little more detail.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself. Just because they're law doesn't mean they're moral. Let's take Will's Killer Mike. We'll leave that as a mic drop, and we'll go on to the next one. Now, this is going to be interesting because I felt that there was, even though everybody is technically a nominee, right? We're talking directors here. I felt like there were some strong candidates. There were some cases to be made here, and not just to give an example. So obviously, Mervyn LeRoy, who just made "I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang," you could argue that if he made the best movie, he probably should be hand in hand as the best director. But there, just to kind of note some of the ones that stood out to me, even though we didn't necessarily talk about the Grand Hotel in great detail on this podcast, I think Edmund Goulding, the way he kind of utilized that space, we're in one building the entire movie. Now, I think he could have done it a little bit more, but right away you get like these kind of phone rooms. Then you get the grand shot of the atrium. Then you got kind of a conference room, and then you get a lobby area, and then you get the different rooms. Now, I think the different rooms, we could have had a little bit better distinction of who is what room and things of that nature. But I think he did a really good job. I wanted to give him kind of kudos. And then at the same time, you don't get a good movie like Freaks based on that, just, I guess, subject matter and unless you know what you're doing. And there's some, and the thing that sits out to me is the table scene where they're all eating at the dinner table, and this great chaos scene that's kind of taking place. So just some honorable mentions for me. Will, I don't know if you have honorable mentions, but I'm going to go ahead and jump the gun real quick. I gave it to Ernst Lubitsch, actually. I think as good as Leroy was in I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, I think Ernst Lubitsch made that movie. I think he elevated that movie to something more than what it probably would have been in 9 out of 10 other directors' hands.
Yeah. There's a version of that movie that's bad, right?
Yes,
where you have a love triangle of sorts, and at the end of the film you end up not liking somebody, right? Because of a stupid thing that they did. Here he's able to thread the needle and kind of make you still like everyone and respect where they're at. Even though we're watching two thieves, but I'm right there with you. This is my choice as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I thought I was going to maybe catch you off guard with that one.
No, dude, I'm right there.
So much so. So let's take this now, and we'll kind of transition it into the best actor now, because the thing he does here, and I'm not saying that this is my best actor, but I think because Lubitsch is so good at elevating everything in that movie, it gives I'm going to lose his name here. Let me find it. Gives Herbert Marshall. Yeah. It really elevated his game and made him stand out even more. I thought he was above average, really impressive in this movie. He was kind of bouncing between two lovers. He's got to showcase how he's doing that, but not come off sleazy. He really did a great job, both director and actor, as a combination here of, like you just said, at the end of this movie, we still kind of like him. You know what I mean? And he's a crook. So I think because Lubitsch was so good, it made me really consider Herbert Marshall as a best actor candidate. And I didn't go that route. But I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think he's right there. I don't really. I mean, I was kind of thinking about this year and trying to find the best actor, and he was there. But I think it's because there's not a ton else to fall back on. So it's really him, and then you can talk about Gary Cooper. But I think you're probably right in our discussion last week that it's not strong enough all the way throughout to really give him any consideration. So it's between Herbert Marshall and Paul Mooney at the end of the day. And if you I think you probably know where I'm leaning with this one, but Paul Mooney's the clear choice here. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the movies we watched that Paul Mooney is just the right choice here. He's got a couple of scenes that are on the same level as Peter Lorre, and
Yeah.
saying that I think really kind of that's enough said for me.
Is it fair to say that Chaplin, Lore, and Mooney, because they're so good at storytelling and they stand above, right? That they're the
Mhm.
best three male actors we've had so far.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because Paul Mooney's my pick as well. It would be criminal, I feel like, it to try to outthink the Academy on this one, and he just deserves it. He elevated two movies this year that we've seen. Um, Elevate. I got to use a different word. It seems to be the theme tonight. He just stands out in both those. And what I liked about, Scarface, or what I liked about I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, is that kind of the dichotomy of characters that he had to play in the beginning of the movie versus the end of the movie. He was kind of this youthful exuberance, is the term I used last week. And then he kind of got to that distress and disdain, and you could see it all on his face. And he did a really good job of being both. So to me, he just shows more of the complexities of maybe the modern day actor that we like versus what the more traditional actor was giving us back in the 1930s. So
Yeah, and you can really kind of see the difference between his style of acting and the other styles that are kind of more popular right now. And I'm sure there's like a diegesis you could go find online where some smart person has written about like where this transition happens, but it there's something so like written, there's like a reciting that's happening for most of the actors and actresses at this time, where they're not really living in that experience of the person that they're acting or they're acting out. So Paul Mooney kind of transcends that. Charlie Chaplin kind of transcends that, where you don't really feel like it's an actor doing a part. You feel like you're watching a real person on screen. So
yeah, and ultimately, see, and that's the thing where my love of film came is, it wasn't just one thing. It was, a few kind of tent poles along the way. But for me, it was always performances. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that there's actors that are so good at just transforming me into this environment with them, and making me just completely forget that I'm watching a guy perform here. I feel like I'm watching, the real thing.
yeah,
So maybe we'll have that conversation someday down the road about some of our favorite performances of what got us into film. Um,
yeah,
let's talk best actress. Best actress. We had a few leading actresses this year. We had in Shanghai Express, we had Anna May Wong. We had Warner Oland. We had in the movie Freaks, we kind of talked about, we had Layla Hyams. I'm sorry, I apologize. In Shanghai Express, we had Marlene Dietrich. I was reading the supporting actresses. We had Marlene Dietrich in Shanghai Express. We had Layla Hyams in Freaks. Again, Paul Mooney, he is in Scarface and I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. He
hmm
is on the marquee all by himself. So that kind of tells you a little bit about who he is as an actor, the roles in which he picks, and just kind of the way he tells stories. Grand Hotel, we had Greta Garbo. Trouble in
hmm
Paradise, we have Miriam Hopkins. She gets slated as the kind of the leading actress in this movie, even though she doesn't have the same amount of screen time.
yeah,
And then ultimately we get Helen Hayes for Farewell to Arms. Well, I will tell you right now, I I want to say there was maybe two strong performances from the
mm,
leading actresses. Okay, strong. When I say strong, I just mean of the entire group here.
yeah,
I went with Greta Garbo. believe it or
Okay.
not. Um, for for the for what she was being asked to deliver, I thought she had the most screen time for a lead actress, and she played her role, I think, to the way it was supposed to be played.
Okay.
Now, I say this with kind of an asterisk because the person I originally wanted to give this to
Yeah.
technically is a supporting actress.
Mm.
So
You
I
can give
kind
it
of
to Kate
struggled.
Francis.
I wanted to go Kay Francis,
Yeah.
right? Because I thought she brought a level of like sophistication and like in wonder, and like I could read it on her face. I felt like she really did a great job with that performance,
Yeah.
but technically she's a supporting actress there.
Mm.
So I went Greta Garbo from the Grand Hotel. It surprised even me because I didn't expect to go that route. I wasn't in love with Miriam Hopkins' performance, but I do think
Mm.
she's probably the one that gets the second nod here. Tell me what
Okay.
you think.
Yeah, I think we should just go with Kay Francis, because
Oh,
that's where
interesting.
I was going to go. I don't, if I were the producer of this movie, I wouldn't have been pushing Miriam Hopkins for the lead actress. I would have put Kay Francis out there and said, "This is our lead. This is the lead performance,"
Okay.
because I thought she was strong enough. She clearly had more screen time. I mean, she was there for 80% of the movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's the right choice here. Is we just kind of say, sorry, Miriam, you were the lead on the actual poster, but when it comes to award season, we want the person who has the best chance at winning, and that's Kay Francis, because
Oh,
I think that's the best performance we saw.
oh, I agree, man. I can't. We've nailed every single one of these together. I thought we'd have a little bit more. This I don't think we've had this many
Yeah,
in agreement yet. So if you're gonna give her the nod there, then where did you go for your supporting actress?
yeah.
Would you have
So
went Joan Crawford? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I really thought a lot about Helen Hayes in the. I just want to make sure I mention her performance in Farewell to Arms, because that last scene, I just think she's doing some wonderful work there, and she's in it too much to be supporting. So, and I just think Kay France. I just want Trouble in Paradise to have another win here because I feel like it deserves it. So for supporting, I really feel like it's Joan Crawford.
I
She
would. Yeah.
Yeah, I really feel like with her performance and her back and forth with the Barrymore brothers, she kind of at the end of the day felt like she felt like the best performance in that movie, in a pretty good movie. And yeah, I think that's the clear choice here. If as long as we're okay with Kay Francis uh, not being in the supporting.
Hey, man, we make the rules here. Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. Totally fine with that because again, I didn't know we were going to go this route, but Joan Crawford was my number 2 choice for that. And I just thought it was almost unfair because I felt like she felt like more of a supporting actress and one that stood out to me. I That's so interesting. So now I'm even more curious to know where you're going to go with your supporting actor because
Yeah.
again, I wanted to give love to the Grand Hotel because I felt like the movie there were some things that were clearly wrong with the movie, but like I thought there was way more right than there was wrong. And again, I went with Lionel Barrymore as my choice for supporting actor because and he's the gentleman that played kind of the sad, gloomy, down on his luck, nobody likes me type thing,
Mhm.
kind of annoying, but he's in
Yep.
it a lot and he gets better as the movie goes on. More
Yeah.
tolerable, I should say.
Yeah. No, that's thought for sure you were going to have something different here because I remember when we talked, you were kind of annoyed by him.
Yeah.
So I thought we were going to be different here, but that's my choice too. Mostly because I think him and Joan Crawford play off each other just really well throughout the film. And even though he has some parts where he's like a little bit under your skin with the woe is me mentality he's got going, it's still pretty clever and funny along the way. So, and in a year that's kind of lacking some of those performances on the fringe, I think this one's pretty straightforward.
I totally agree, man. I totally agree. It's so funny. I don't think we've ever agreed on every single one there.
Mm-mm.
The last category really is just it's not even something I want you to think about too much. Because I want to know what comes to your mind. What scene or scenes come to your head right away? It's like because to me that one's almost it doesn't need to be thought about. It's like, what is the image that is stuck with you? And when I ask you that question, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, so I don't. It wasn't super easy for me because that dinner scene in Freaks that you mentioned earlier, that one was one of the first ones that popped in my head. Just because there's a tension there and like an anxiety that's real, and I think Todd Browning is. I mean, he's known as kind of one of the masters of horror, and I think it really is showcased in that scene in particular because you're just like there's just this tension building, and you don't know what's going to happen and that scene's very memorable for me. But the second scene, that the one that I'm gonna fall back on that I've talked about so much is that the final scene in A Farewell to Arms. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't. There's a person or a movie or someone talks about the end of movies. If the end of the movie is great, it might be Bill Simmons. Talks about if the ending of a movie is great, it's gonna be a good movie, right? And for
Yeah.
me, that's A Farewell to Arms. Like, totally understand your criticisms of it. I think they even won me over a tiny bit, especially in that middle part of the film. But this last scene, it just speaks to me because it's got all the right pieces moving at the end.
In the words of Vince McMahon, damn it, they're only going to remember the finish. And that's kind of what you remember here.
Yeah.
It's like if you leave them happy going home, you kind of did your job. And sometimes I think movies, might do that more often than not because they feel like, well, maybe we didn't quite get where we wanted to be, but this is let me just restate that. I'm somebody who I have thoughts for movies, okay? And I've even dabbled at writing down the story structure and the outline of these movies before. But I got to be honest with you, a lot of them start with an end scene. Like, wouldn't that be awesome to end a movie that way? Or wouldn't that be an emotional, fulfilling way to end a movie? Now, can I work backwards and get a story that makes sense to get us there for that payoff, right? So, like, I think a lot of times in Wes Craven, he used to say that he used to write. He'd get a soundtrack that he liked, and then he'd write a movie based on just these songs that he liked. It's just kind of cool that people have different way of telling stories, and sometimes it's as simple as this is a really sweet, powerful scene. Can I tell a story that builds up to it?
Yeah. No, it's interesting too because that's kind of transcended into music videos a lot more lately. I'm thinking especially of 21 Pilots because their albums kind of have a concept and they kind of do their music videos in a storytelling arc and you see it in other bands too that I'm kind of blanking on right now. But it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to kind of play with story like that and to see what kind of story can come from other forms of media.
Yeah, no, and when they do that and they do it well, it's really like it's enthralling. Like you want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to 1933. We put 1932 to bed, and I'm getting excited because in 1935, just a programming note, when we get to 1935 at the end of that year, we are going to be giving our first ever top 10 movies thus far. So every 5 years, the idea is to do a top 10 of everything we've seen so far and, what will move up the list, what will move down the list. When we get to 1950s, 1960s, is there anything from the 1930s still on here? 1920s. So just a programming note, we're getting closer to that. I'm getting excited. But Will, 1933, here's some film debuts, some names for you. Fred Astaire, baby. Lucille Ball. All right. Ruth Gillette. Alan Hill Jr. Jimmy Hanley. Let's see. I'll go down this list a little bit more, see if there's any more names that pop off the page here. Bill Williams, Russell Wade. I've not heard of the last two, but we're getting some names here. We're getting to a place where we're going to start, like we said, Joan Crawford. 1933, Will, is the year that Clark Gable becomes the forefront of everything. And I think it's a position he holds for quite some time. So there's things that are changing. Let's see who was born this year. Let me just look real quick. Let's see. Anybody that jumps off the page.
There's a couple. One of the producer that just died. Thriller. What was his?
Yeah, it's on a dude.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue.
I'm not good at the names, the
I'll
details.
have it before the end of the show, and I won't even Google it because I know. Gene
Yeah.
Wilder was born in this year.
Oh, okay.
Willie Nelson is born this year. So just we've got some new players coming about, and we've got some first debuts. So Will, 1933, interesting year because when I looked up the movies, I saw a couple. I was like, okay, I know that movie. That movie must have been huge because it's at the forefront of the year. So, like, I'm excited to kind of get into the draft. But before we do so, I want to talk about kind of where American Society, Film Society is in 1933. So, we're a year shy of the Code Haze, in which we've referenced on the show a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But we're pretty much, we're kind of like year one now of the middle years of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
So, and what's exciting is I'm going to nominate a film here in a few that I think really might be the first great look that we're going to have if we decide to go that route into the
Yeah.
Great Depression. So I've seen quite a few movies in this year that are diving into those stories. We asked when that might show its face, and Will, it looks like 1933 might be the year.
Yeah, I am excited to see what that movie is because I didn't see that when I was
Oh,
kind of flipping through things, getting ready for the draft. So I'm excited to see what your pick is there because I've got 6 or 7 here that I'm ready to nominate. So we'll have to kick one of mine off probably because that sounds interesting.
well, maybe. I feel like sometimes I know like 3 that I love for sure, and then you can kind
Yeah,
of sway me on the other 4 or 5. Sound films, they're here to stay. It's official. It seems like every studio at this point, 1933, Will has bought in the any director or storyteller that prefers the old way. Well, then that's where you can go is back in the old way because they are they the only thing they're working on now at this point, it seems like every studio has bought in and has a sound recording system of some sort, or they have hired out. It's now playing with that technology and how can we make it better.
yeah,
Um, the other thing is I talked about technological advancements, rising iconic stars are coming. Clark Gable, Katharine Hepburn is starting to become a main name in this year. One thing I did want to talk about though is theaters as a social hub. So in modern time today, where would Will want to go if he wanted to have a social life? Where would you go?
Oh man, do I want a social life?
I know you don't, but where would you go if you wanted
Oh,
one?
where would I go? Okay. Well, clear choice usually falls back on the bar, right? That's a good place to go. Now movie theaters have bars in them, so there's a twofer, right? You can get a movie and a drink. Um, yeah, library. Yeah. No, the movie theater is a good place to go. You can the pool hall. There's all sorts of fun places.
Well, during this time, even though the Depression was getting at its peak powers here in 1933, what would happen is people still flooded to go to the theater, whether they were seeing a movie or not. It was a great place for them to basically have a meetup. It was just a central place for people to have an excuse to leave the house, and instead of sitting on the street corner, let's go to the movie theaters. So
Okay.
I love that. I wish maybe that kind of existed more in like a movie theater coffee shop type thing,
Okay. Yeah.
where you could kind of go and instead of for us older guys that don't want to go to the quote unquote club anymore, I would go to a coffee shop and chum it up with some, fellow like cinema lovers.
Yeah.
Couple quick hitters, Will. First drive-in movie theater in the year 1933.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Monopoly was created.
That makes sense.
The first ever. Oh, yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it? That does make
Yeah.
sense. The first ever Loch Ness Monster sighting was this year.
Exciting stuff.
Major League Baseball has its first ever All-Star game,
Oh,
which is interesting.
yeah.
And then the rise of the jukebox. So just some kind of Americana 101 right there for you, Will. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to bring to the table as far as I think we've talked a lot about the Depression. And until we kind of get to the end of this,
Mm.
I'm not sure that there's anything really new that we need to outside of the New Deal happens this year with Mr. Roosevelt. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, a big deal because it sets off the next 100 years of politics. It's really kind of all coming back to that over the next 100 years. There's also the rising fascism, in Europe. This is a pretty, I think this is the year that Hitler kind of starts to accumulate power. We get that. I think Albert Einstein also comes over. It's this year or next as a fugitive. What's the word I'm looking? Refugee.
yeah,
There's. I think we're going to start running into. You keep saying the Hays Code. I'm curious about when that propaganda machine starts to kind of turn as well, and starting to see some of these films that maybe are trying to tell a story, but there's some underlayment of some subconscious, like, America first mentalities, or German first, or wherever we're watching the movie from. So curious about what's coming after these next couple of years.
yeah, and propaganda. You're right because that was definitely being pushed through the cinema system. And we're what 6 years shy of the First World War at this point, or I'm
Hmm.
sorry, Second World War at this point.
Yeah.
And what's interesting though is that after what year was it? 30. It was 1930 that we had All Quiet on the Western Front, and um,
I thought it was 31,
was
but
it 31? I
no,
thought
no,
30.
you're
No,
right.
it
It's
was
30.
30.
Yep.
So we're now in the year 33. I'm still not seeing a lot of World War One movies anymore. And I
Hmm.
just wonder if after we kind of had that great year with All Quiet on the Western Front, and then we had Howard Hughes film. Um,
Hmm.
I'm just Hell's Angels. I'm just curious if maybe we kind of got our taste, and there was a lot of World War One movies prior to that those
Right.
years. If they kind of just you kind of thought that this was kind of put to bed, right? Great
Yeah.
Depression kind of came in. It's the new talking point. World War One is put to bed. Little do they know that in 5 short years, 6 years, we're going to have another big one, and the war of all world wars really coming up.
Yeah, so that's always an interesting thing to think about. Is the First World War is called the Great War
Yeah.
until we get to the actual Great War. So yeah, no, definitely going to be some. I'm just really curious to see if we run into any of that, into the propaganda, because it's a huge deal for like popular cinema. I'm just not sure how much we're going to see it if we're trying to focus more on like film for film's sake. But
Oh, that's interesting. So I was thinking more about like cinema being used as, the 10, 15-minute news reels in the front end.
uh,
You're
yeah.
talking about the propaganda actually in the movies,
Oh
right?
yeah. So like think of
Yeah.
Inglorious Bastards. So
Yes.
I'm not an expert, right? So I don't know any of the names of the films that come out in that 40s era from Germany. But that was a very popular, hero story, right? The
Yes.
German soldier overcoming the Allies. So just curious to see if we run into any of that stuff. And if we do, kind of trying to see if there's some uh, foundation that we can see, because it becomes a really popular genre in the 50s and 60s when we get all the American war hero stories. So just kind of tracking some of that, but we're probably a few years away.
Okay. No, it's we'll keep our eye on it, and let's dive in, my friend. 1933. We are going to nominate our films like we do, and then ultimately at the end we will draft. We try to go 6, 7, 8. Usually is our top. We did that once. Let's see how many double features we come up with, if any, and let's roll. Will, I want to nominate the first one because I think it's just the obvious one, right?
Okay.
I think it is. I could be wrong, but movie came out March 2nd, 1933, and it is directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Shodstack. Main actors are Frey Ray and Robert Armstrong, and it's a movie about just a simple little story about a giant ape who's captured on a mysterious island and brought to New York, where he escapes and terrorizes the city. Little movie, Will, called King Kong, which for its time, you know,
Hmm.
technology or technologically advanced, pushed the envelope, really had people flooding to the theaters, and it's kind of had this weird kind of stay. What's the word I'm looking for? Stranglehold, or not stranglehold, but like just a stay. It's found a way to stay throughout
Yeah, some
cinema history.
staying power.
Staying power.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole monster verse built off this Godzilla and King Kong, so it's definitely got staying power. And there's some. This is also the first thing I had on my list. A little advanced statistics, right? I did some advanced research. It's got a 3.9 on Letterboxd and 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's well regarded in the film community. So I think this is an obvious choice for sure.
Okay, so I'm just gonna ask the question. We drafting it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, draft 1933. First draft pick off the board, King Kong. Interesting side note, though. I, too, did some research, Letterboxd and, IMDb and all those things. Letterboxd did not have a 4, I believe, if I'm wrong, King Kong was a top, most popular movie, highest rated movie on Letterboxd for 1933. So I don't believe we're going to have any 4s in this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't. There's a way on there to kind of do a search to see what's the highest rated, but it's always tough because if only 5 people have seen a movie and they all rate it 5, it's going to be a 5, and so you don't get a clear picture of what the best movie is. But yeah, of the movies I have nominated, there's only one other 3.9 on here. So I think this. The interesting point here is that it's a popular movie that is also well regarded. So I'm curious to see that kind of intersection there, to see what else can come from it technically, and all other sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, I had mentioned earlier, Will, about tent poles, little tent poles along the way that I kind of made me fall in love with movies, right? And I got to be honest with you. So I was never a big King Kong fan. Don't get me wrong. I didn't hate it. It wasn't anything that I gravitated to. But I must say, and I hope we get to this, maybe we've already passed it. We might have already passed it. I'm not sure. There was a movie called Mighty Joe Young, which have you seen this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dude. I loved this movie as a kid. This is, you talk about a tent pole. It was a black and white movie. I had absolutely no reason loving that movie as much as I did. And I just did. As a kid, it was like, something stood out to me. I don't know if it was the playful, me caring and having this empathy for this, King Kong character. In this case, it was Mighty Joe Young. But that's kind of a ripoff to the King Kong story, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, straight ripoff. In fact, I think I'm not going to open up IMDb because I'll crash my damn computer because IMDb sucks. But I think that the writers of this film have credit on Mighty Joe Young for character.
Oh, interesting.
If I remember seeing that correctly. I might be pulling that out of thin air, but
now I just want to make sure we're not. So there was a remake. I forgot there was a remake of Mighty Joe Young, and that's not the one you're talking about, right?
It is. That is the one I'm talking about. I didn't realize there was an original. Okay.
There's an original one in 1949. This is the movie that I loved, was the 1949 version of Mighty Joe Young. It was black and white. It was phenomenal, and I hope that when we get there, it is worthy of a nomination, because it is a favorite of mine. But interesting. So King Kong, we've drafted it. It's on the board. I'm going to let you have the table, and you tell me what your next draft pick is.
Yeah, one more interesting note about this is there's also another movie from this year called The Son of King Kong. So kind of curious that they had that set up already. And you said King Kong came out in March. I wonder if it was so successful they immediately put something else out. Be curious to don't want to watch Son of King Kong, not nominating it, but just curious.
No, but going off of that, I just wonder how many of these getting to the director here, which was Marion C. Cooper. I wonder how many bars they're in, because they're on these same lots, right? They're all using these same lots. So I wonder how many times I'm telling this story about this bigger than life gorilla boy, and they're like, oh, we got to get on that. You know what I mean? So I wonder how many like the sinking of the Titanic. How many Titanic movies came out trying to make money on the backs of Titanic right afterwards? So.
Oh yeah. One of them's called Ghost Ship. It's a terrible horror movie. Um, my my first nomination, and hopefully the second movie we'll be watching, is tagline: He gave his wives a pain in the neck and did his necking with an axe. The Private Life of Henry VIII. Directed
Ooh.
by Alexander Korda, and the lead Charles Lawton did receive a Best Actor win for this performance. It was also nominated for Best Picture. So this one kind of looks like we might get a little bit of a comedy,
Okay.
kind of maybe a heightened comedy, a little bit of kind of meta stuff going on because they're placing it kind of in the past. Be curious to see if there's some interplay here with some like political sentiments of the time, to try to track some of that. But um, the tagline got me, so this one's on my list.
King Henry VIII marries 5 more times after his divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Um, if that doesn't sell you on going to the movies to see it, I don't know what does.
Right.
Interesting. So, Private Life of Henry VIII. All right. It's on the list, my friend. I didn't even come across that one. So
Oh, okay.
that is interesting. Period drama, biography, drama, history. So very interesting. But you're right. It looks like it is a comedy. So
Yeah, and it's a highly regarded 95% Rotten Tomatoes, 3.4 on Letterboxd. So there's a little bit of a sag there with the Letterboxd community. Kind of, I always get a little interested when the Letterboxd community kind of has a dip away from the critics, because a lot of times they're pretty close. So just something to note.
okay. No, I've noted it. Okay, so now I think outside of King Kong, we totally agreed on. I think everything else is really going to be preference, what we fight for, and what we think. Maybe there's something new land that needs to be discovered here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to nominate one again. I want to nominate this film.
Okay.
It's Fritz Lang. And I know I pushed for M because that was considered to be one of his masterpieces, that and Metropolis. This one is touted to be like that next tier down, but
Okay.
I really like just the subject matter in which he tackles, Will. The movie's called The Testament of Dr. Mabuse. All right. April 21st, 1933. And not Dr. Mabuse, a criminal mastermind, continues his schemes from a mental asylum, directing a crime wave through hypnotic influence. The film is a chilling look at corruption and psychological control. So it's just like in an era that doesn't feel like a lot of these movies are being told at the serious nature in which we like Fritz Lang to be doing it at.
Yeah.
I just feel like it stands out when we read some of these other taglines. You know, like how many romance movies have we watched? How many comedy? You know what I mean? Like how many of these are we getting? These kind of these
Yeah.
thrillers. Like I don't know that we've gotten a lot of them so far, or any of them were worthy of it. But I wanted to make sure we nominated this. It's Fritz Lang. And just a side note, you talked about the new regime taking over in Germany. This is the year that Fritz Lang, he leaves Germany and ends up moving to Paris and never goes back. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, so I did see this movie, but I didn't look at it because I didn't realize that Fritz Lang directed it. I kind of saw the poster and was thinking to myself, if we're gonna go with King Kong, we already kind of have a horror movie. I didn't want to like over nominate horror here, but knowing it's Fritz Lang, it kind of makes me think this might be a good, especially given the time period, and the it sounds like there's a psychological nature to it. I'd definitely be curious to see this one. So if it ends
well,
up being one we watch.
it's funny because I should have done a little more research, but when I typed in Dr. Mabuse on Letterboxd, and apparently Fritz Lang made a movie called Dr. Mabuse the Gambler in 1922. He also made Dr. Mabuse the Gambler Part 1, The Great Gambler in 1922. So, and then I see that there's Dr. Mabuse, even as late as 1960 directed by Fritz Lang. So I'm wondering if this is an ongoing character that maybe kind of like a Charlie Chaplin's, the oh, I'm forgetting, what do we call him?
The Tramp.
The Tramp. Thank you. So again, maybe it's something because we don't know the whole totality of this character. Maybe we want to shy away from it, or maybe we dive in right in the middle. But that was just something to kind of keep in note. So, and I lied, by the way. Letterboxd has bumped this up to a 4.0. So,
Oh wow. Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, knowing that it's got a little bit more of a, because it seems like all of these are the same character. It talks about a criminal and a couple of the ones that I found so far scrolling through here. It would be interesting to kind of see some of that and see if it's worth our time.
okay.
Now, if this is a year that we don't have a ton of films we want to watch, maybe this we throw it on.
Sounds
So
good,
cool.
buddy. What do you got for me next?
All right. So I guess I guess I'm gonna go with one of the films I found, and this is the one I kind of read about the most because it kind of seems like it played a huge role in the Hays Code, kind of getting implemented and taken a little bit more seriously because of its content. And it's a film called The Story of Temple Drake. It's directed by Stephen Roberts. The lead is Miriam Hopkins. And it sounds like this film is about a character. I thought I had the tagline here, but I don't, so I'll just kind of pull it from memory. But it's about a character who is abused in some way by one of the male characters in the film, and the movie kind of deals with the consequences of this. And it sounds like some of the material in it for 1933 would have been pretty disturbing. So I just thought this was something to flag because some of the stuff I was reading mentioned the Hays Code, and we've been talking about that quite a bit in the lead up to it. So, and knowing that Miriam Hopkins, we saw her and didn't get a lot of her in Trouble in Paradise, it might be interesting to kind of see her in a more lead role to see what she brings to the table for a full film.
Yeah, so tagline reads: a wealthy but neurotic Southern belle finds herself trapped in the hideout of a gang of vicious bootleggers. The gang's leader lusts after her and is determined not to let anything stand in the way of his having her. Very compelling. Directed by Stephen Roberts, and then writers here William Faulkner, which for some reason that name is on the tip of my tongue there for some reason. So,
He's
interesting.
a great American author.
Okay, so this is probably one of those where I believed. So this is probably an adaptation of a book, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I got to be honest with you. So this one is kind of catching my ear, maybe more than the other one was. But that's just because I kind of tend to go crime drama. I'm more of that centered. But I'm going to nominate one, Will, that maybe as a potential double feature candidate with your first nomination. Okay.
Okay.
And this goes to, again, I don't know where we are with them. I don't know if we need any more of the Marx Brothers. But again, this is touted as being 1A or 1B of their masterpieces. So it ends up being Duck Soup is the movie that I'm nominating, but Monkey Business is considered their masterpiece, and Duck Soup is considered like right down like the next one. The movie that we watched with them was just to kind of get our feet wet, which was known as Animal Crackers, and we enjoyed very much.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know that we need another Marx Brothers film, but
Yeah.
it's one of their better ones.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that we need to, just for the sake of this, I think we need to nominate.
Yeah, I think putting it kind of at the top of the nominee list is a good idea, and kind of see, I've only got 3 more movies really that I'm considering for nomination. So if we're, sitting at like 8 or 9, I can't imagine Duck Soup not making it. So.
Okay. And being that that's a comedy, that could be a double feature with the Private Life of Henry VIII. It'd just be kind of an interesting. You get a time period piece, and then you get these goofballs on the back end. So something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you got for me? What do you got?
Yeah. So I guess for my next one, I'm trying to figure
I'm a
out
little
if you.
surprised that we don't have more crossover.
I
And I
think
think
we're
that's
about to.
I think that's going to continue to happen as I definitely thought it was going to happen once we reached like the 60s and the 70s,
Oh
like, but early on, I thought we would just, the ones would stand out. And I'm a little interested here to see where you're going.
yeah. I'm curious to see. I think we might have a couple of crossovers, but maybe I'm wrong. The next movie I'm going to nominate is called Design for Living: Three Hearts That Beat as One. It's directed by Ernst Lubitsch. Has our Miriam Hopkins, so a second movie from this year that I'm nominating with her, and then also Gary Cooper, your favorite, and Frederick Marsh. So it sounds like a love triangle that's maybe not so much a love triangle as a love threesome uh, kind of theme going on here. So I just, as good as Trouble in Paradise was, I thought seeing Ernst Lubitsch come up this quickly again, it might be fun to kind of see and maybe really feel out if Gary Cooper is ever going to win your heart over here. But this one looked fun to kind of see what would happen.
So this one's on my list. And I
Okay.
think since we have crossover, we don't need to I think we can draft it.
Okay.
Because it is crossover that we have, and we haven't had a lot of that right now. So right now, let's go King Kong and Design for Living. Now, I must admit, I'm more excited about watching another Lubitsch film. But being fair and open-minded, I want to see if Gary Cooper, because it did feel like at the end of A Farewell to Arms, he was starting to get it figured out, even so much so that the director had mentioned that. Frank Borsage had mentioned that in the beginning he struggled getting him to emote the way he wanted him to, and finally towards the end he kind of got him there. So maybe that was like the launching pad for Gary Cooper kind of figuring it out. So I'm there with you, buddy. I'm on board, but I must say it's going to be a very tough pill to swallow if Gary Cooper doesn't come through for the third time for me.
Yeah.
I might have to take a solid half decade off of him.
Yeah, maybe this one we can call a farewell to bad acting.
I like it. Design for Living came out. Looks like the release date on this one was December 29th, 1933. And like Will alluded to, it's two American friends in Paris fall in love with the same woman, leading to an unconventional romantic arrangement. Now, Will, I know we've mentioned this before, but is it just like is it as simple as Europe being the kind of the center of culture at this point in time? Why we keep making films and having all these love stories based in overseas, nothing in New York, nothing in Chicago, nothing in San Francisco, you know what I mean? LA.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think you're overselling it a little bit, right? Because we do have a fugitive from a chain gang that kind of took place on the East Coast and then moved its way.
I'm sorry. I meant romances.
Oh,
like, are we not capable of love in the United States?
No, not yet. It's 2024 and we're still not there. So no, I really think it's as simple as there's still a romance tied to Europe. A lot of people in the 30s still they probably know a family member in Europe, right? They probably have communicated with a family member in Europe. I don't think it's as distant, even though it was harder to get there then. It was as distant in people's minds as it is now, because culture in the United States, it still hasn't fully formed, right? It still hasn't fully gotten to a place. I mean, it's only the country's just 140, 150 years old at this point. So I think there's still a romance about Europe because it's still so familiar to the people in the United States.
Okay. I can dig that. And it feels like a lot of the great, and I don't want to say American novels, but a lot of the, great early day novels, are based overseas or in these love stories that take place in all these different areas. So I get it. I was just curious because it seems like if it's romance, it's overseas is what it feels like. So, okay. So Will and I currently, just to update you, we've nominated 6 movies. We've drafted 2. The next movie, Will, is one that I I guess it would be my passion project. It's the one that I want. I kind of alluded to it earlier with the Great Depression. This is a story of that. I really would like to put this one on the docket if we can. And it's directed. This is, again, we've got some repeat director going on, and I want to make sure that we cover new ground too. But this is William Wellman, so the director of The Public Enemy, what we had with James Cagney. This movie's called Wild Boys of the Road. All right. Came out September 23rd, 1933. We've got a couple new names that we haven't had before as actors, Rochelle Hudson and Frankie Darro. Tagline is this: two Depression-era teenagers become homeless and join a band of traveling youths facing harsh realities and camaraderie on the road. It's a gritty, poignant look at youth struggling during hard times. I thought this was, I don't think we've seen anything like this yet. And also, it's specifically a hard time driven from the Great Depression, which I think is more direct, and not any of the movies have been that direct with struggles because of the Great Depression yet. So I saw it. It was highly touted. It's got a decent Letterboxd grade that is slipping me now. I think it's 3.7, 3.8. I could be wrong on that. But I think it's one worth checking out.
Yeah, maybe a grittier Grapes of Wrath we got going on here from the poster. So anyone who's read that book is, familiar with the struggles of the Great Depression and families and young people traveling away from their homes to try to find work. And I would definitely be interested to watch this because, we've been talking about the Great Depression, but really haven't come up against it. So I think it's a good choice.
Okay. Let's keep rolling and we'll circle back to it. Or do you want to draft it?
Let's
circle back to it. Let's circle back to it.
Okay.
Because there's a couple other names. There's a couple other movies on here that I think we should give high consideration to as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what I'll go with next is Morning Glory. It would be the first Katharine Hepburn movie that we've seen. I know she's only done a couple things before this. So this kind of seems to be one of her breakout roles. Tagline, a naive actress is shown the ropes, or is she shown the rope? I wrote that one myself. It's also starring Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Duncan and our best friend Adolphe Menjou. And it's directed by Lowell Sherman. So I thought this one looked pretty interesting. It's a little bit low on all of the ratings, but that doesn't, mean anything necessarily. We've had a couple of those that we've ended up liking. So seeing Katharine Hepburn on screen would be an awesome experience too.
Not only is this a must, Will, it's a must. And the reason it's a must is because if I'm reading this correctly, and you can help me here, she won 12. 12. Am I reading this correctly? She won 12 Best Actress Academy Awards.
Is that including supporting?
It just says Best Actress 1934, 36, 56, 57, 41, 68. Let's get this straight. I want to get this straight. How many? I'm just going to do a quick Google. How many Best Actress awards for Katharine Hepburn?
A ton.
4. Okay, thank God. I was going to say 12. She was nominated for 12.
Yep.
Won 4 and won her first one, Will, in the year 1933 with a little performance called Morning Glory. I definitely want to draft this. I want to put it on the list if we can. Again, I'm a little worried about the overall totality of the movie, but I'm a little excited because just because of the rating, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a little excited because I've already been on record stating that performances can kind of push me through something. So I'm excited for this one. Any pushback on drafting that one?
It was my nominee. Let's go for it. I'm up 2-1.
I'm a little impressed by the fact that you wrote the tagline on a movie that you haven't even seen yet. So,
hey, man.
You know what's interesting for Katharine Hepburn, Will, just a side note, she won her first one in 1933, didn't win her next one until 1967, and then
Yeah.
she went her Patrick Mahomes year, she went back to back, 67, 68, and then finally got her last one in 1981 for a little movie called On Golden Pond. So
Yeah. It's
this movie
almost
was
50-year gap between the first and last. That's saying
incredible.
something.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. As a matter of fact, that's an interesting kind of anecdote we should look up. What's the biggest gap in years between first and last win? That's an
It's got to
interesting.
be that one, right?
Gotta be, right? That's literally, yeah, that's 47
Eight.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 47
Mhm.
years. Interesting. So I too did have this movie on my list. It was the next one I was going to nominate. So it means I only have, Will, one more
Okay.
left. And it's one that we haven't had a big ensemble cast this year. And this one seems to be the one that kind of does that. It's Dinner at 8. It's got Marie Dressler, John Barrymore, his brother Lionel Barrymore, Jean Harlow, and Wallace Beery. We've had all of those before, but we did not have the director. The director's name is George Cukor. And basically, Will, it's at a high society dinner party. The lives of various guests intersect, revealing secrets, ambition, and humor. The ensemble comedy drama examines class, relationships, and hidden struggles. So essentially, it's like a grand hotel, so to
Yeah.
speak. But yeah, just interesting. So I thought it'd be interesting to put an ensemble cast out there and see if it's something that we feel is worth watching. So
Yeah, I'm curious too if maybe this is the year of redemption for our Gene Harlow and Gary Cooper. If we were to watch, maybe this could be our double feature, the redemption double feature. Um, so yeah, no, this sounds like a lot of fun too. I'm starting to think that maybe we found some too many movies here
well,
for 1933.
yeah, we've got an interesting. You're right, because I've got us down. I think we got 9 movies here. Did you have any others?
I've got one more.
Okay, what do you
And
have?
yeah, so the last one I have is a movie called Lady for a Day. It's directed by Frank Capra. The lead is May Robson. She's the lady. And lead two is Warren William, and then supporting Guy Kibb and Glenda Farrell. So kind of some unknown names here. I'm not sure we've run into any of these folks before, but when an old woman must be a lady to prove her status, where will it take her and us? So a long story short, she has some communication with someone from the motherland. It sounds like it's maybe Russia or somewhere over in Europe. And she's been lying about being a lady in high society. And then the friend's coming for a visit, and she has to, prove to her friends that she's actually part of high society. So this one just sounded fun. I think, see if I can pull this back up, but I know it got nominated for a few things. 4 nominations actually, one for directing, for best picture, for best writing, and for best actress. So it was really loved in 1933 by the Academy. Whether or not that means we need to watch it now, I don't know. Sounds like it could be a little bit of fun, but
Well, are you familiar with Frank Capra? Because that's a big name.
yeah. So I think, that's one of the notes I wrote, that It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a
Well,
Wonderful
not
Life.
directed, yeah.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So both of those
Yeah.
movies are, later down the road. We get to Mr. Smith in
Mhm.
1939. We get to It's a Wonderful Life in 1946.
Mhm.
So whether or not we need Capra now or not, we'll debate that right
Okay.
now. So
All right.
we have 10 movies on the docket. Right now we have drafted King Kong. And I'm going to say, I think we drafted Design for Living.
Yep.
And we drafted Morning Glory. So we've done as many as 8. We've done 2 double features that year.
Mm-hmm.
6 is our floor.
Yeah.
8 is our ceiling. 7 might be the sweet spot, Will. I'm going to allow you to make a case for 1 right now.
Oh man. Oh, I don't want to give too much dead air here because I'm having a hard time. I want to watch them all, but for the sake of not doing this podcast until we're 78, um, I guess. Uh, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and say the Private Life of Henry VIII. I think I want to laugh a little bit this year. I think this would be a good choice if we're gonna be trying that double feature out. That would allow us to watch that and Duck Soup together. I feel like we need to find some levity here this year because the last couple years have been a little more, serious. So maybe if we had some comedy here to kind of lighten things up, that would be helpful.
Well, the way I see it right now is we've got King Kong, which is an action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Design for Living is going to be your romance, correct?
Yes.
All right, Morning Glory. What was that one touted as? Is that drama?
It seems like it's a drama. It probably has a little bit of a comedy along the way. It seemed like there was some, antics.
Okay. So now we have comedy with Private Life of Henry VIII. So let's do this for right now. Let's double feature it with Duck Soup. Okay.
Okay.
And let's just keep going and we'll tentatively draft Duck Soup and see what happens.
Okay.
I really want to make a case for Wild Boys on the road. I know I'm stuffing it up, but I want to make sure that we get a good snapshot of American, just kind of Americanism, that's not a word, but American life during the Great Depression, and we just haven't had a lot of it yet. And I wonder if there's a lot of these movies being made, but we're missing them because we've got to see King Kong, we got to see Morning Glory, we've got to see these movies. And I just wonder I just don't want it to go underneath. So I would like to put that one on there, Wild Boys of the Road.
I am more than okay with that.
So that puts us at 6. Now, that means what we have left, Will, is Fritz Lang's Testament of Dr. Mabuse. We have A Story of Temple Drake. We have Dinner at 8. And I did not write down the last one. I forgot. What was the last one? It was Frank
Lady for a
Capra's
Day.
Lady for a Day.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can either do this. We can each choose one more apiece. Or is any of these make sense in a double feature route? Because right now, Testament of Dr. Mabuse, is that a horror or is that a
Sounds sort of ancillary.
Okay.
Yeah, like it could be more psychological, thriller-ish.
Thriller-ish. Okay. So let's call that a thriller. And then the last Story of Temple Drake, what was that? What was the genre there?
That probably drama.
Okay, drama. Okay. I was just curious if any of these had anything in common. So, okay. How do you want to go about this? Because I'm with you. I would love to watch all these, but I think for what we're doing, we should probably cap it at 8 if we can.
Yeah.
And then get these. So go ahead. What do you have?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm kind of thinking, another potential double feature here, it seems pretty obvious, is if you took the Story of Temple Drake and watched it with Design for Living, you could have a Miriam Hopkins double feature.
Okay.
That would, it'd be two dramas, but also one seems a little bit more lighthearted and another one a little bit more serious because she's, in the first one, she's trapped in a bootlegger's warehouse. So that's one option that I'm kind of thinking as far like if we're going to, it feels like that's one of the ones that we need to pick out of these last 4 because of the Hays Code and because it sounds like it's kind of borderline for 1933. So I'm interested to see what borderline means for 1933.
Okay. So, let's try this then. What if I don't think that there's a real big case for Dinner at 8. Okay. It's an ensemble cast. It's interesting. It's a comedy. I'm not sure I want to watch. I think there's there's some comedy sprinkled into Morning Glory.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Private Life, Duck Soup. That's 3.
Hmm.
So let's take Dinner at 8 off the thing, and then it really just comes down to Will, A Testament of Dr. Mabuse or A Lady for a Day. Um, we both nominated these differently,
Sure.
so we kind of have our preferences here. So
Yeah.
how should we this is an interesting question. How should we settle tiebreakers in the in these years? We've done a good job of just agreeing so far, but like
Yeah.
like if you are pulled one way and I'm pulled another, um let's
Yeah.
ask this question real quick, real quick. King Kong, new director, yes. Designed for Living, who's the director on that one?
Oh, let's see.
I want to make sure we're continuing to get.
Is that the no, that's
Or that's
Ernst
Lubish.
Lubitsch.
That's
Yeah.
Lubish. Okay, so 1 and 1. Morning Glory is
Lowell
okay.
Sherman.
That's a new one. Okay. Private Life of Henry VIII is a new one, I believe, right?
Alexander Korda. Yeah.
Yep. And then we get into Duck Soup and Wild Boys of the Road, which is repeats. So we've got 3 repeats so far, and 3 new ones. So
Okay. Yeah. I honestly, I would be fine with flipping a coin on this one. I think Lady for a Day. I'm tempted by that one because just because it's got the 4 nominations for the year, and then you have the Frank Capra going on there. But at the same time, we're already watching a couple comedies. This seems like it's going to have a lot of comedy in it as well. So, how many more times are we going to get to watch Fritz Lang? I don't know.
he directs for a long time. He
Yeah,
does. But with that being said, I don't want to downplay that movie either. So let me see something real quick. What is the? I'm going to go to a release date. What was it? Lady for a Day. Lady for a Day, Frank Capra. Because to me, the case is ultimately this. Do we need to watch Frank Capra's? It's not a director or a debut by any means, but takes its place among the greatest pictures ever made. That is the opening line on Letterboxd here. It's rated a 3.6, but the opening tagline is takes its place among the greatest pictures ever made. So that's pretty convincing.
yeah,
Okay, I'm a sucker for the 4.0 Dr. Mabuse, but I don't think we need to see this Fritz Lang movie. So
yeah.
let's go Lady for a Day.
We've got another Fritz Lang coming up here soon too. That's I think the Fury 1936.
Okay.
So we're gonna have another chance pretty soon to see him again.
Yep.
So
I'm totally on board. So I want to make sure I have it right. So the ones that we're not doing, Dinner at 8. We're not doing Testament of Dr. Mabuse, but we're doing 8 movies this year. So we do need two double features though. So the 2 double features was Morning Glory. Private Life of Henry VIII and Duck Soup. And then we did, what was it? Story of Temple Drake. And what were we double featuring that with?
Designed for Living.
Designed for
Miriam
Living.
Hopkins double feature.
I like it. That gives us 8 movies, my friend. And as always, you guys can follow us and we'll throw up online the order of which we'll be doing this in the release dates. But you feel good about this year compared to last year? Where are you at with it?
Well, when I was doing the research, I was a little worried because I was kind of coming up against all this stuff that I wasn't quite sure on. But after kind of getting a couple crossovers with you and seeing a couple of your nominations on here that look like a lot of fun, I think it's going to be a good year.
I agree, buddy. We got 8 in the year 1933. We're inching closer to that halfway mark in 1935. And we're getting a bunch of new names. And this is going to happen. A part of me feels like we should be kind of discovering new land the whole time, but like that's not the case, right? Because just like we're seeing today, like the names of 2023 and 24 are Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet. They're gonna have their pockets where they're on top, and then there's gonna be a new cast of characters. So I'm here for it. Let's see what happens. And any final thoughts, Will?
I don't think so. I'm glad we were kind of on the same page for 1932. That was kind of fun to see. I think we were a little limited because there wasn't a lot to choose from, but at the same time, it was still a pretty good year. So glad to still be doing this. I mean, we're coming up on a year real time of being on this project together, and I'm glad we're sticking it through.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to when we get to our year one anniversary here, I think we'll be almost 40 movies in, and that's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
we've taken some breaks, and I think we're going to start ramping things up here a little bit before we kind of press pause a couple weeks for Thanksgiving and Christmas and whatnot. But
Yeah.
those might give us more time because we might have more time off. So who knows? We'll just have to look at it and play it by ear. But a lot of great movies coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. You know where to find us, engage, reach out, do what you have to do. But most importantly, keep watching movies. We'll talk to you later.
All right. We'll see you.